Yes. Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year, if I can say that. And
Yes.
Happy New
Hi,
Year to you now.
everyone. Yes. Hi, Håkan. Happy New Year, everyone. And welcome to Azure User Group Sweden. And today is very special because this is our great start or for the beginning of the year, the first session. And we have a lot of things to learn today. And I hope that you're having a great weekend in your couches, your bed, or your home, or wherever you are watching this from a mobile or everywhere. We're happy that you could join us today. How are you? How's your holidays, Håkan? Did you get a time to recharge?
Yeah, it was very, very relaxing and very recharging. But
Yes.
as we all know, Monday was the 2nd of January, so it started very, very soon after the.
Yes, I actually
How
started
about
my
you?
first. I started my first week this week as well after 2 weeks vacation, and
Uh,
I had a good recharging, and then after recharging, I consumed some of my battery already first week, but it was great. I learned a lot, and it's great with challenges and learnings from what we do. All right, so let me see. We have people streaming with us or joining us today. But before we get started, let me just introduce my friend and co community leader, Håkan Silvernagel, here. So, Håkan Silvernagel is a Microsoft MVP for AI. And by daytime, he also works as a manager for big data and AI at Miles in Norway, and he is very active as a public speaker internationally, and he is also contributing to the community as an ambassador for Oslo AI, .NET user group in Norway, and a lot of other communities, and even AI 42, which is an AI school. So that's Håkan, and he's here with us as well to help us and guide us.
Yeah, thank you, So it's an honor for me to introduce Jonah Anderson. She's the founder of our meetup, and she is an Azure MVP and also a Microsoft certified trainer, and she is an international speaker and also a mentor. And in her daytime, she works as a cloud and DevOps engineer, and she is also an active blogger and also a podcaster. And in addition to that, she is also writing a book. What is this book about, Jonah?
Yeah, learning Microsoft Azure, cloud computing and development fundamentals. The result of my cloud migration journey, which is still in progress, and hopefully, it will be published in the middle of this year. So I'm working to the finish line.
And I've also
Yes.
seen recently, or now in the new year, you've started like a mini
Ah,
series. Maybe you
yes,
can say
yes.
something about that. What is that
Yeah,
about?
so I had an idea because all of us have been busy, and then we have little time when we are on the break. I decided to start of the year to do a micro learning series, just 1 minute video where I share about Azure fundamentals, which is some topics are related to the book that I'm writing about, just to be like give that interest to the beginners in the cloud, because I like this idea that we welcome those that are new to the technology, and it's just advanced level stuff. Yes, so that's it. So follow me on LinkedIn if you want to know about it. And I see the people are saying hi already. Yes,
Yes.
Ashish and everyone. All right, let's get started so we don't waste our precious time. Let me just start by sharing our code of conduct to everyone. So this is our code of conduct for Azure User Group Sweden. So as a community, we expect everyone to be nice and friendly, and listen with purpose, and be thoughtful, respectful to others, especially in our public live chat and even our after session fika. Seek to understand the comments or feedback that you're getting and not criticize. Be curious and open to share your ideas with others, even those that you don't know in the community yet. And be inclusive in your comments and questions. If you have further questions about a code of conduct, feel free to reach out to me and Håkan. And the details is also on our code of conduct page and meetup page. All right. You want to share about the fika, Håkan, and then I'll
Yes.
share about the the prizes today.
Yes. Yeah. So me and Jonah, we want to create, an inclusive community, and we want to give you, our viewers, a chance here to be able to ask questions directly to our first speakers. So for that reason, we always, after our sessions, we have like a 10-15 minute Zoom meeting. So we call that a fika, which is very informal. You just log on to Zoom, and then Esther and Freek will be there, and you can ask questions directly to them. And we will share this link with you at the end of our session.
Yes, thank you.
And in addition here, we also would like to promote two prizes, two nice prizes we have today. So one of the prizes is from Microsoft. So we both can offer a learner badge here, which you can get by scanning this QR code. But in addition to that, we will also give away a cool backpack amongst the people who ask questions. So just ask many questions, and you will stand a chance here of winning a very nice Microsoft backpack.
Yes, thank you for that. So, and then you may also scan the QR code for the learner badge for the Azure Heroes to claim this one. And one more thing later, you need to pay attention to our guest speakers today, because they will be giving away a copy of this book. So you see, the author is one of our speakers, and they will have instructions how you can claim one of this book during the session. All right. Are you ready to introduce our guest, Håkan?
Yes. So let me add them here to the stream, and I will just have like a little bit formal introduction first here. Oh, sorry. It's the first time after vacation.
There you are.
You made me all nervous.
It looks like puzzle, right? We have to match.
So today we have the pleasure here of having two speakers, Esther and Freek. So Esther Barthel, she's a solution architect at Cognition IT, and she has worked in many different roles and functions as an IT consultant. And she combines her passion for design and implementing Citrix solutions with a newfound love for DevOps automation using PowerShell, REST APIs, and JSON payloads to automate both on-premise and cloud infrastructure as code solutions.
Wow, that's a very nice introduction. Thank you.
And then we also have Freek, who speaks at various conferences worldwide, both Microsoft Ignite, Microsoft TechSummit, Microsoft TechDays, Azure Saturday, and ExpertsLive. And he has been a Microsoft MVP since 2011, and also authored this book, Getting Started with Bicep, which is the second edition that one lucky winner will be able to have in his or her book collection. And he also maintains a blog at the microsoftplatform.net, where he writes articles and blog posts related to Windows, virtual desktop, remote desktop services, Azure, and other Microsoft technologies. So we're very, very happy to have you here.
Yes, welcome.
Thanks.
We're pleasure to have you devoted time for our community. I know that both of you are busy with your work and on community engagement you do as well. So thank you.
I know, but these are the fun exercises or the privileges of being so actively involved in the community. As Freek and I discovered even during COVID, it's such a pleasure to still have the virtual tour of our Bicep presentation. So even though it's still a wish of mine to get in an actual van and do the road trip physical, I'm still very happy that at least virtually we get to roam the globe and share our enthusiasm for Bicep with so many people and help and reach out to answer any questions that are out there in the community. So
yeah, and this is our first session of the year as well. So it's great to be here for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same for us, Håkan and I believe. Yes. Yes. All right. So people are saying hi. Let me just show a few of them. Nika saying hi. We have, just randomly show everyone. So we have diverse people, some common people, and, well, lost sound. Stefan, and a lot of them.
Nice.
Right. So many are excited to hear from you. So without further ado, maybe we should let you rock the stage, virtual stage at least.
Yep.
All right.
Yes. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. So I know Freek and I do not have direct access to the chat, so feel free to interrupt any of us if there are some questions that we can answer right away. Welcome to the Infrastructure as Code with Bicep on tour. Once again, Freek and I saddled up, so to speak, and got very excited about showing all the cool stuff that you can do with Bicep. And thanks to Håkan and Jonah. Basically, we already had like an awesome introduction. So I'm very grateful that you did that, because normally I just kind of stumble introducing myself and even more introducing Freek. So yeah, I guess we can just skip these 2 slides and just dive right into the fun. Don't you think so, Freek?
Yeah, let's do that. So we have, as Jonah also introduced in sadly in the introduction, we are going to be giving away something during the session. So maybe we should fast forward to that slide.
Do you want me to quickly? Oh.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, just give all the spoilers away. Why not? Oh, there it is.
There it is.
There it is. Phew.
Yeah,
I got it on time.
During this session, we are going to give away a physical paperback copy of the Bicep book. So in order to join that competition, what you have to do is quite easy. Just send us a tweet message about this session. What are your thoughts, or what is your feedback? Make sure to mention us, or at least one of us, to join that competition. Or if you're not on Twitter, LinkedIn, that is all fine as well. I will make sure to draw a winner somewhere later this weekend and ship you a physical paperback copy of the book. So yeah, we'll look forward to that, to sharing that with you. And
yeah, and to challenge you to be interactive during this session as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we would love for Håkan and Jonah to already find such an active community and be able to give away that backpack as well.
Yep.
So let me see if I can quickly. Yes. Thanks for the home button. Oh, you already made the change. Thanks, Freek.
No,
awesome. He likes to surprise me. So
usually it's you surprising
usually
me.
it's
Right?
me. Yeah. So I'm happy that you discovered this as well. So for those of you who are kind of wondering why I started laughing, Freek and I have this wonderful presentation shared through OneNote, which allows us to both share the same content and actively change the content during the presentation. So that keeps us both sharp and on our toes. And in the past, yeah, I did surprise Freek by editing some of the slides at the end of the presentation. But thanks for doing that, Freek. Awesome. Yeah. So first of all, we figured that if we're gonna take you on this Bicep journey, it's also very important to start at the basics and basically explain where Bicep fits into the whole ecosystem of transitioning or migrating to cloud, or even getting started with your cloud journey. And in our case, of course, we're focused on Azure. So if we're talking about Bicep, we have to also explain infrastructure as code. And I know this is a new, very popular terminology, same as with DevOps. But what we're talking about, if we're focusing on infrastructure as code, is that we're basically adapting some of the software tooling and mechanisms to provision infrastructure resources in our private or public cloud environments. And basically that means that we're focusing or we're using templates and scripts together with an orchestration tooling to provision those resources. And if we're talking about infrastructure resources, it's usually network, storage, but it also means that whole cloud infrastructure and security settings that come with that as well. So hopefully this gives you an idea of where we're starting in our Bicep journey. And one of the things that well, not confused me, or that I found very important to also explain if we're talking about code, is that there basically are two specific, I'm not going to say streams, but specific types of coding that we can talk about. So the first one is imperative code. And basically, when we're talking about imperative code, we're talking about executing a sequence of commands. I like to basically translate that as providing a step-by-step instruction manual. And to link it more to one of my favorite hobbies, it feels like following a recipe for basically building your own burger, which is something that I love to do. So what I mean with that is that you have to specify each and every step, as you can see in this recipe as well. It focuses on not just grilling that minced burger, but also on how to prepare your barbecue sauce and in which order do you need to build that bun together with the burger, and some healthy things as well on there, and bacon, lots of bacon, of course. If we're translating that back to infrastructure as code, we're mostly talking about scripts, because if we're scripting our automated deployments or automated configurations in Azure, for instance, it's all about those step-by-step instructions, as you can see in one of the examples that I included in this slide. The other type of code that we can talk about is something that is becoming more popular. And I will get back to that right in an instance. So if we're talking about declarative code, it's much more focused on specifying your end configuration. Basically, it feels like ordering from a menu. And of course, I included a burger menu because you already figured out where my hat was during this slide deck preparation.
But you do realize, Esther, that it's actually lunchtime for us, right?
Yes, that's what I realized as well. I think that's why I'm so focused on the burgers, to be honest. So bear with me. Basically, what I mean with ordering from a menu is that you specify the end result that you want to have, or the end configuration, if we're talking about code. But it still allows me, same with ordering in a restaurant, ordering your lunch in a restaurant, is that you can still specify some of the settings. Like, I want my hamburger to be medium rare cooked. I would like to have the bacon on it, but not the tomatoes. So you still have opportunities to make it a special order or a custom order, but still in the end, you're focused on the end result. So I don't have to care, or I don't have to be bothered with how it's cooked in the restaurant and how that burger is built up, like we saw with the previous one, the imperative code. So translating that back to infrastructure as code, declarative code is all about using templates. So that template specifies my end configuration, and then I basically present it once again to that orchestration tool, and then have that tool determine how to build it in, for instance, Azure. In this case, talking about templates and the example, this is what Bicep is all about. But before we dive into Bicep, one more little mention. Of course, if we're talking about templates and Azure, it's all about the Azure Resource Manager templates, or the ARM templates. And when I first dived into ARM templates, I got all excited when I saw this example of how the template is structured, because that looks very easy. It has clear sections for parameters, variables, resources, and even for output that I want to share back after my deployment. But if you really get started with ARM templates, it might become a bit overwhelming. At least, sharing some personal experience, it was very overwhelming for me. And I was one of the very fortunate people that had Freek on speed dial. So whenever I was working on getting an Azure Virtual Desktop deployment automated through ARM templates, I had Freek on speed dial to talk me through all the troubleshooting and scrolling back and forth through this template to figure out where I made even a typo, or where we could blame DNS to be the root cause of all our problems. And that's when Freek showed me Bicep, and he got all excited about it. And I think it's even best to let you explain Bicep, Freek, because I think you did a great job explaining it to me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that's actually a great introduction into what Bicep is. So if you're not or less familiar with Bicep, what is it? In short description, it's a domain-specific language, or short DSL. So what does that mean? It allows you to create resources in the Azure cloud, because it's specifically designed for the Azure cloud, in a declarative way, right? So recall the hamburger menu that Esther just shared. So the question that we always get is, isn't that exactly the same as the ARM template? Although, all the complexity that Esther showed, that does the same thing. And the answer is yes. So the second question that we then always get is, does that mean that a Bicep template as such is going to replace ARM and ARM templates? And the answer there is definitely no. So Bicep is a transparent abstraction layer on top of ARM and on top of ARM templates, with the goal to simplify the authoring experience and to provide a much cleaner syntax when it comes to reading or troubleshooting or digesting a specific template. So we'll see some side-by-side comparisons in our demos in just a second as well. So Bicep takes away all of that complexity while still allowing you to take advantage of all of the capabilities of ARM templates and the ARM engine, which are still very, very powerful. So the other thing that Bicep also brings and focuses on is the ability to reuse your code. So that means sharing your code with colleagues or someone else that you want to share your piece of code with, providing a functionality called modules. So this allows you to extract pieces of code, put them into separate module files, and share them within your department or within your company, or maybe even worldwide. So we'll see some examples on how to do that in our demos as well.
That's a great spoiler for the question that Alan already asked. Awesome, Freek.
Okay, good. So that's basically think about Bicep as a layer on top of ARM, removing the complexity and really focusing on, getting that hamburger ready, if so to speak. So I still love the analogy. It's awesome. So when you take a look at Bicep, where do you position that in the Azure Resource Manager infrastructure architecture, if you will? And of course, this is a super simplified architecture just for the purpose to show you where Bicep comes in. But we have that Azure Resource Manager engine, that big blue bar, right? That is our front door to all of the resources and resource providers that we have in Azure to create storage and compute and networking and identity management, or even Kubernetes clusters, etc. So on top of the ARM engine, of course, there are different ways to communicate with the ARM engine. We're not going to focus on that. But one of the ways is using an ARM template, and that still remains. But on top of that, we have the Bicep language. So you, as the infrastructure as code creator or writer or author, you will be authoring Bicep templates instead, which you will then transpile into an ARM template. And by transpiling, we mean taking a source code of a specific language or an infrastructure as code language and transforming it, transpiling it into another language by maintaining still the same goal and purpose of that template. So in the early days of Bicep, so this is the 0.1, 0.2 version, which is already a long time ago, you explicitly had to do that yourself by using the bicep command to transpile it yourself into an ARM template and then provide that ARM template into the ARM engine. But today, you can just directly pass your bicep file directly into the ARM engine. The ARM engine will then transpile it for you and process the creation or deletion or whatever you're doing.
Making it even easier to build your infrastructure based on code.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so it will become much more intuitive as well, as we'll see in a couple of demos. And the modularity, that's what we'll focus on today as well, is extracting pieces of your code, put them into separate bicep files, which they will then turn into a module to be able to reuse that within your company or worldwide as well. The last thing I want to mention here is that Bicep, the entire thing is open source, right? So it's all available on GitHub. And we all also encourage you to take a look at that and provide feedback, whether that's bug requests or pull requests or new features that you want to introduce. Because Esther and I, we have a close relationship with the product team that's behind Bicep and ARM templates as well. And we know for a fact that they are super eager to learn about what you're doing and what you're running into in terms of issues or things that you want to achieve. So they are looking a lot on the feedback that's provided from the community and from other members as well. And at the end of the session, we'll have a couple of links to share on how to get engaged with the product team on a monthly basis as well. So stick around for that last slide. So before we dive into the demo, the next question that we always get, especially over the last year or so, I think, is what is then really the usage of Bicep? How well is it really adopted in the market? Because we've been using ARM templates for many, many years, right? And so the Microsoft isn't really keen on, of course, sharing a lot of telemetry data about their cloud, right? It's their intelligence, but they did share some details last year, and that showed that they have about 1 million deployments, or sorry, 1 million resources being deployed using the Bicep language. So this was back in May 21, which is, of course, quite some time ago. But the reason that they picked this one is because at this time they had the 0.3 version, which was the first production-ready version of Bicep. So 1 million resources, that's still a lot, right? But they also shared back then one of the latest numbers, which was of August 2022. And that showed 22 million resources being deployed. So, of course, it's not about the number of resources that at 22 million, it's a lot, right? But it's more
Size
about...
does matter, yeah.
I was not going to say that. But it's, of course, much more
That's
about...
why I'm saying it, yeah.
It's, of course, much more about the actual growth of adoption, right? So coming from 1 million to 22, that says a lot about how many users are actively, starting to adopt the new language.
Yeah, but it also explains why Microsoft is also very enthusiastic and very quick in responding to any product improvements or product requests that we have as a community. So it definitely is here to stay. Making sure that it's not a replacement for ARM templates, but it's just another set of tooling that can make it a lot easier to get started with building templates. If ARM is just one bridge too far as a beginner, then Bicep definitely, and we will show that in the demos in just a minute, but Bicep definitely is built to make it easy for you to get started with those templates.
Yep. Yeah, you can also tell by the way that the Bicep language is now also promoted across the docs pages and documentation, etc., where Microsoft provides sample code. The user only provides sample code in ARM, but they now provide both as well, ARM as Bicep. So that's also, of course, a clear indicator on where they're going with this language. But yeah, Paul, we could talk about it for hours, but let's dive into a couple of demos, right, Esther?
Yes. So first of all, I think one of the really cool additions to having Bicep for our usage in building templates is that there's also a Bicep extension for VS Code. And at first, I was still struggling to adapt VS Code as my new code editor. Because, well, I'm a PowerShell girl, so I still love the ISE as my very safe haven of slowly building code. But I have to admit that once I got started with Bicep and having that extension active in VS Code really made it so much easier to get started. And that's one of the reasons why, instead of doing a live demo where I usually get distracted with all the cool stuff, I pre-recorded 2 videos to really zoom in on that added value of the Bicep extension in VS Code. So let's get started with that. And I auto started the video, so that's the introduction. So first of all, to get started with creating a resource template, this is already showing all the additional information that that extension is giving me. It's helping me step by step actually building the code. It even has an option to make sure that I have all the required properties instantly there in my template. So all I have to do is just specify all the values for those properties. You can tell that I live in the Netherlands because I pick West Europe as the location. But the other cool thing is that the extension also gives me a pop-up of available options. Or even if I hover over with my mouse over the property, it gives me the type that it is, string in this case, but also all the available options. This makes it so much easier to create a template that is error less or has less errors. And the other cool thing, but this is basically because Freek is a huge contributor to Snippets, and I realize the video is a bit going fast, is that if you do not type in resource full but do res minus, then you get a full list of snippets, and those are basically pre-configured pieces of code that you can already instantly enter into your template or add to your template. So hopefully, I know this was very fast, but basically, bear with me, I'm just that excited about the extension. But this gives you hopefully an idea of, within less than 2 minutes, you are capable of building a template that will deploy a storage account in Azure automatically for you by just presenting that template to the Azure Resource Manager. One of the other examples that I have dives into how the Bicep extension also helps you in basically troubleshooting or fixing problems or offering fixes to problems, which is called a linter function. So if we're looking at this example of code, it already has a couple of problems that are asking to be fixed. So what you can see is that I have at least one error about not being very secure with my parameters. And once again, the extension gives me additional information if I hover over, in this case, the section that is marked as an error within my code. I also have a couple of warnings. And as you can see, it also provides links to each and every linter rule that is checked by the Bicep extension. And this one, I think, is even one that already offers me a fix. For instance, by saying that I forgot to specify that this type of parameter is a secure string. So I add the decorator to it, and what you see, or hopefully you saw, was that now instead of a warning, I have an error. And that's because I do have to fix the adding of secure information into my template. The cool part is that you can also control the number of error messages or warnings that are flagged by the extension by configuring a bicep config.json file in the same folder as your Bicep files. And basically, it has all these rules that you can flag as either give me an error, give me a warning, or in my case, I'm just simply ignoring all the security settings or warnings by totally turning it off. And what you see is once I save that Bicep config file, the problems are getting less. I'm not saying this is a good way to solve your problems. Please bear with me. Please follow the instructions on how to solve it. But for demo purposes, this makes it a lot easier because all of a sudden warnings can be changed into informational messages, which means that I can easily use or continue in creating and testing other functionality. In this example, I have a lot of parameters in my template file. And another thing that VS Code has is a lot of built-in functionality through the context menus. In this case, offering me to easily build a full parameter file that you can use as an input when you offer your Bicep template to the Azure Resource Manager, and providing the context-specific parameter values through that parameter file, just as what we normally would do with presenting an ARM template to ARM. This is a fast course, I do realize that, but I didn't want to take away too much demo time from Freek.
Yeah.
So Håkan, if you can switch to Freek's screen, and I hope you're ready, Freek.
Yeah, I am.
Awesome. Then I would gladly hand it over to you and see if I can edit some more slides in the background.
We'll see. Yeah, thanks for the demo. So that I think that really shows the power and the capability of the VS Code editor when it comes to authoring Bicep templates with all of the additional help that you get and the linter rules and the way they are actually guided into creating from scratch. So the next step we'll do is we'll take a look at some of the other syntaxes approaches you can do with the modularity stuff that we mentioned in the beginning. So the first thing I want to show you is an existing Bicep file. And this deploys actually multiple resources into a single file, right? Which is, of course, a very common scenario. So in this case, we're deploying a virtual machine with containing a VNet, containing a network adapter, and containing a virtual machine. So the first thing we can actually do, just to show you some side-by-side comparison, and this is also added recently in VS Code as well, I could just right-click this file and say build ARM template. So what I now get on the left-hand side is the JSON equivalent of the Bicep file. And if I would open these up like side-by-side, we can clearly tell the difference between left and right. So this is where all the complexity really starts to show. So left-hand side is the original, you could say old school JSON template with all of the brackets and semicolons and all of the syntax overhead going on, where right-hand side is much clearer and much easier to read and to digest and to start authoring. So just as an example, if we would scroll down to the number of lines inside this JSON code, it would be 129 lines. Whereas the same thing in Bicep is about 90 lines, right? So we're not only reducing in syntax, but also in number of lines of code that you need. The thing I wanted to mention here is if you start to deploy multiple resources, there's most likely a chance that they depend on each other, right? So for example, if I would take a look to this, let's take a look at the let's do the virtual network as the example here. So we're creating a virtual network, and we can see that there's a dependency. Let me scroll down. So once we start to create the network interface, there's a dependency because, of course, first the virtual network needs to exist prior to be able to creating that VNet, the network interface, sorry, right? So that's an explicit depends on section here. If we take a look at the Bicep code on the right-hand side and scroll down to the same resource declaration, which of course looks much simpler, but there's no depends on section here. So how did it end up in the JSON template that actually is going to be used by the ARM engine? So the thing is that what Bicep does is when you start to refer to a resource that you previously declared, right? So this is a resource showing the network adapter, and I'm pointing to the VNet, which is a symbolic name that Esther also showed, and I'm getting the ID of that VNet. At that point, Bicep actually knows that there's a dependency between these objects. and it starts to add these depends on sections for you. So that's what we call an implicit depends on section. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. And if you are familiar with ARM templates and you've been authoring those in the past, you will probably know that once you have a lot of resources to deploy, it can become very tricky to have the good amount of the depends on sections to make that deployed in the correct order. So that is what Bicep also does when it comes to multiple resources. So the next thing I want to show you is that module part, right? We've been mentioning it a couple of times. Let's take a look at it. So what I have here is a main.bicep file, which is just another bicep file containing the parameters, the variables that Esther in the beginning also showed. But we now have something else. We're not using the resource name here, but we're using the module. So we're specifying module and then that same symbolic name, and then a reference to a local bicep file. So this is us telling the ARM engine anything that's specified inside this bicep file, treat it as a module and also deploy it as part of this main.bicep. So what we can then do is define the scope. Where is this going to be deployed, right? So all of the resources inside this bicep file are going to deploy it inside this scope. And this scope, as you can see, is a resource group. And then we're then going to pass a couple of parameters towards that module. So these are parameters that we collected above in this main bicep file, and we're passing them along to this module to be able to have the VNet location, in this case, the VNet name and the subnet name. What you can also see, and this is also something that's really handy to use inside bicep files, is conditional deployments, right? So this is not a module declaration. This is a resource declaration. So we're creating a resource group, but we're doing that based on a dependency. So we're only going to deploy that if this condition is true, right? And as you can see, this is a Boolean specifying to a parameter that we collect above. So only if this Boolean is set to true, this is actually going to be deployed. So that's an example of an easy example, but you can imagine more advanced scenarios where you can use conditions to deploy something or not deploy it. So if you take a look at this specific file here, this is of course a local file on my local file system for now. Let's actually take the VM as the example here. We can see that although we're using this as a module, this is just another bicep file, right? So there's no difference between a module and a regular bicep file. So
it does basically allow us to use like templates and reuse that code in our deployments, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so I could just take this bicep file and deploy it separately, or as I said, as I showed in the main file, leverage it as a module and just treat it as sort of a black box and have it deploy whatever inside that module file. Yep, that's right. Cool. So the other thing is that inside this file, we're also using something that's called loops, and this is a very common scenario. Let me just get this screen out of the way. So in this case, we are declaring a resource, which is a virtual network adapter. Again, we're not deploying it once, but we're deploying it multiple times. So we're creating multiple instances of this network adapter interface based on a loop condition. So we're going to say that for I, and I is going to be the index in range of 1 to number of virtual machines, deploy this network adapter. So in this case, we're going to deploy 5 network adapters at the same time. So that's an example of how you can use looping inside modules or inside bicep files as well. The other interesting thing, which is also a very common question, is we've shown you the way to point to an existing resource, right? So right here, I'm pointing to the VNet that I declared above, and I'm getting the ID, the social property of the VNet. But what if I didn't create that resource inside the bicep file? Would I still be able to point to that to retrieve properties? And the answer is yes, because we're using that existing keyword, which is a very powerful keyword, which essentially says we are not creating that VNet here, but instead we're pointing to an existing VNet that has been maybe created by someone else, or could be inside a completely different Azure
resource group,
subscription, subscription or resource group, etc. So we're pointing to something that we know is out there just to retrieve the properties. So that's the existing keyword.
Yeah, and I think this makes it very powerful because at least from customers where I've been, I am still allowed to create all the virtual machines that I need within my subscription, but I'm definitely not allowed to build any VNets or subnet configurations because that's basically the other team. So
Yep.
I love how we can reference existing resources in Azure and still use the full power of templates to automate my own resource deployments.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree that the symbolic name in itself, that's a really powerful thing in Bicep. So that results in those huge lines of codes in the JSON equivalent, because there's no such thing as a symbolic name in there. So it's definitely really powerful to use. So that's in a nutshell how modules work, right? So I have a main.file, and I'm pointing to, in this case, different module files that contain other pieces of code that might be written by someone else or by me, or I'm sharing that code.
So I think we can really bridge this to the question that Alan had at the beginning of our presentation, where he basically asked, how can we use Bicep modules and even share that easily with others? Thank you for showing the question. Awesome. So what's the best way to create Bicep modules from resources, and also the best route to share them with other team members?
That is a great question. Yeah, and it's a great jump towards the next topic. So very well done. So as you can see right now, we have Bicep files that are stored on my local file system, right? So that's ideally for me, but if I would want to share this with Esther, that's going to be a challenge, right? So this is where also module registry concept comes in. So let's actually dive to that topic as we are.
Because I think from a DevOps point of view, it would be easy to say, put everything in a repository, and then you have a centralized place to maintain any of the changes or improvements that you're making to the modules. But I think the registry is even more powerful, because that allows you to also be more in control of versioning a full module file.
Yep, totally agree. Let's dive in and actually emphasize that versioning as well. That's important to mention. So what we're doing is this is just another Bicep file, just to show you what we're creating as a prerequisite for using these container registries, which are short ACR. So that stands for Azure Container Registry. So you are creating that resource, right? So this is just another Bicep file to create that ACR inside the Azure cloud. What I'm then able to do, and let me open up the PowerShell commandlet. Where is it?
It's 15, right?
Oh, there it is. Oh, that's the wrong number. I'm not sure why that was. Okay, I confused myself there. But this is the deployment line to get that Bicep file into there. And then the end result, and I'll show you that in the portal in just a second. We're able to retrieve, in this case, the URL that points to that ACR, to that Azure Container Registry. What we're then able to do is use the Bicep command to publish a module that is currently on my local file system into that ACR. So the end result then is that there's going to be a module file inside that ACR that you can then share with other coworkers based on the permissions on that specific ACR. So let me switch to the Azure portal real quick. So this is the example here. We have that container registry. If I would open it up, we could see that there's a section here called repositories. And inside the repository, this is that path towards the module, right? So this can be anything that you want it to be. In this case, it's Bicep modules storage for the example. And here's that versioning, right? So this is V1 of that Bicep file. So this means that I can now share that with other coworkers to start using that module without having to have it on the local file system. So the way you would do that is super easy. If I would take a look at this main.bicep file, we would still use the module keyword, we'd still use that symbolic name, but this time we're not pointing to a local file, but instead we're pointing to the URL where this version of the module is stored. And that's it. So just, the rest is just similar, just providing it the name, again, the scope where we want to deploy this, pass it the parameters, and start leveraging this module. So that's the way that the ACR works. It's a really powerful way to, as we said, share Bicep modules across anyone who has access to that ACR, essentially. So hopefully
this basically allows us to build a similar registry like the PowerShell gallery, for instance, or your artifact feed within Azure DevOps. So it gives you a very centralized location to basically separate maintaining and versioning your modules from the actual templates that you are deploying. So that, I think that makes it very powerful to even more easily share your modules with the entire community, so to speak.
Yeah.
Though there is still like one little small print with this, I think, Freek, because the registries are still bound to my Azure subscription, right? So it's still only accessible by my co-workers and not the entire community.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so anyone who has who needs to leverage that model, who of course needs to have Azure permissions towards that ACR to be able to read it and get the code. That's of course going to be mandatory. But on that side, Microsoft is also working on something else that they call not the ACR, but the Microsoft Container Registry, which is then the public version of something that we saw in just a second, right? So these are
Wow.
a piece of code that Microsoft put out there that you can use in the same way. So now it's not called ACR, but it's called MCR. What's in the name, right? But that allows us to use these modules the same way we're using the ACR modules as well. So in this time, we're relying on Microsoft providing these modules for us. So for now, it's just a small list of modules that they have created up until now. We'll see this grow with more scenarios, more use cases to leverage, and hopefully this at some point will also be open up for anyone to contribute code to as well. So that's the MCR part of the container registry solution. So looking at time, so the last thing that I do want to show you is the scenario of what if you are an existing ARM template developer and you want to transition to Bicep. Esther showed a great way to start from scratch. But what if you have a large collection of JSON files and you want to transpile those back to Bicep? Is that possible? Of course it is, otherwise I wouldn't mention it. But here's an example. So we are looking at a JSON file, right? So this deploys, again, an Azure Virtual Desktop scenario with a couple of resources. What I'm able to do is just right-click here and say decompile into Bicep. And within a second, we now have the Bicep source code of the JSON equivalent, right? So this is a super easy way to transition to Bicep based on existing work that you did, existing resources you created using JSON files. The good thing is, that allows you to decompile an entire Bicep template with all of the resources in it. But sometimes you might want to have a really specific resource and just one, and not the entire JSON file. So what you can then do is, let's open up a sample Bicep file here. And let's actually quickly go to the Azure portal and take a look at just a random resource. In this case, we'll select a virtual machine. We'll select JSON view, and we'll copy the resource ID here. So going back to my VS Code, I could just right-click here, and I could say insert resource, paste the resource ID, hit enter, and within a second or so,
Azure
is a
is
live
slow
demo.
today.
So it is a live demo. Let's try that again. Insert resource.
Yeah, I think Azure is not on our side today.
You can feel the excitement, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah, it's just slow. Okay.
Oh, and I should place it twice, so that is why I also get the Linter rules. That's a nice bridge towards the Linter rules. But as you can see, this is the full Bicep language of the resource that I just entered. So just a single resource by pointing to a resource ID, and you can use any resource ID that's out there in the Azure cloud, and just take a look at the code, start reverse engineering it, start learning from it as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's up on the transpiling and retranspiling, or backwards transpiling, or whatever you want to call it, section. And well, before we go back to the slide deck, there's one more thing I want to show you, which is in terms of visualization. So as soon as you start to create more resources and leverage more modules, at some point you probably want to see what you're actually deploying, right? And that is now also really easy right from within the console. I could right-click any Bicep file and I could say, open the Bicep visualizer.
Oh yeah, I love this one.
Right, so I now have an interactive diagram of all of the resources that I'm about to deploy, including mentions of the modules I'm using, the resources that I'm using, etc. And as you can see, this is also interactive, so I could change this around or revert back to what it was as well. The other great thing about this is that it's also interactive in a way that it builds up as you are typing. So if I would open this up side by side, and if I would, for example, introduce another resource here just by simply copying and pasting it for now, getting rid of the linter rules, you can see that right here, a new resource has been added, right? So as I'm typing this and as I'm changing the template, it also starts to update and visualize what it's actually creating. So that's a really easy way to do that. And this is, of course, just 3 resources, but just to show you what it looks like if I would take a little bit more resources, like, for example, in this one. And by the way, also the visualizer is also available right from within this click here.
Yeah, and the cool part is that the visualizer also includes all the module references.
Yep.
So it
exactly.
doesn't just show the main Bicep with links to modules. No, it also takes on the content of the module.
Yeah. So the module is outlined here, like that folder icon, and inside of there with all of the resources. But as you can see, this is really helpful when you start to document this or explain this to a coworker, or just want to have a visualization of what you're actually going to create. So that's definitely a great one to start using as you are learning the language and trying to figure out what you're actually creating inside the Azure portal.
Yeah, and we're still trying to push Microsoft to also include an export to JPEG or an export to Visio, for instance, option in there. But unfortunately, that's taking that's a bit larger challenge, I think, than just the visualizer. So right now, it's still a matter of taking a screenshot and adding that to your documentation or wiki pages, whatever you prefer to keep up to date with the code you're building. But yeah, I'm still very hopeful that in the near future we will be having export opportunities.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, so let me switch back to the deck because we promised to share a couple of links and a couple of call to actions. Did you want to go over these, Esther?
Oh, sure. So as we mentioned at the beginning, first of all, there's a very extensive documentation provided for Bicep from getting started and showing you what you need to set in place, even mentioning VS Code and the Bicep extension. So that's the easy link to get started with Bicep. And as Freek mentioned at the beginning, we're also in very direct contact with the developers, but that's not an MVP exclusive perk, so to say. There is a Bicep monthly community call where they invite everyone in the community that is interested in Bicep to join that call and to basically give direct feedback and comments on the roadmap that they present for Bicep. GitHub, I think, is very explanational. As we mentioned at the beginning, Bicep is open source, so they have listed all the code in a Bicep GitHub repository. And they invite you as well to make contributions. For instance, I know Freek made a lot of contributions to the snippets that we can instantly use in the code. But also if you report any issues that you might encounter, or if you have any modules that you would like to share with the community, this is the place to be to create your own pull requests and see your own contributions in the Bicep code reflected. And for those of you who felt like, especially my videos were too fast to reproduce yourself, there's also a whole Bicep learning path available on Microsoft. And I think it even gives you your own sandbox to experiment and to see how your templates are deployed in Azure. So feel free to check out all these links and get into action, get involved, get excited, and share your excitement about Bicep with us. And for those of you who are going to join us at the Fika, I might just even share Freek's phone number because we would love. I would love to not be the only one to have him on speed dial. No, just kidding. But definitely feel free to reach out to us through social media. Maybe not by phone, but at least through social media. If you have any questions, if you need, or even have exciting stories that you want to share with us, we'd be very happy to help you out.
Yeah, and in regards to learning, you can still, send in those tweets to win the book. So make sure to do that. Other than that, do we have any questions? I don't have any visual on the chat, but are there any questions you want to address now, or do we want to do that?
Yes, I think we'll take some questions here.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that we can get it answered in. So we can start off here from the start here. So we have Ashish is asking,
yep.
How does Biceps authenticate with Azure?
Yeah, so what we mentioned at the beginning very quickly with the infrastructure as code slide is that we're using those templates, so in this case Bicep, in combination with what I call an orchestrator. But what we basically mean is that if you want to deploy your Bicep templates to or present it to the Azure Resource Manager, you usually use either PowerShell or the Azure CLI to run that new deployment commandlet. And that allows you to either provide an ARM template or a Bicep template. So in that process, you first obviously, it was, I stepped over that. To use that commandlet, you first have to log in to Azure. So that's where the authentication happens. So then you are already able via the CLI or an API to communicate with the Azure Resource Manager, present the template, and then have the magic happen. So I hope that answers the question.
Right.
Jonah, do you want to take this next one?
Yes, I do. Yes. Any advice? I was switching between sharing because I don't want to remove Esther on this one. Okay, let's remove the screen. I want everyone to see you when you answer these questions. I'll remove the PowerPoint for now. So we have a question for Alan, and he said, any advice on troubleshooting Bicep deployments? Have an issue where Bicep deploys a V1, VHub, an Azure front FW firewall, and when it reruns, it disconnects the firewall from the hub. Tried using what if, but didn't help.
Oh wow,
that's a challenge here.
Yeah. So one thing that I usually do, but that's because I'm still very visual oriented, is that I always double check in Azure itself, either at the resource group, what deployments were done automatically. So if you go to in the Azure portal, go to resource group, and think even on subscription level, there's a tab that says, or an option in the menu that says deployments. And there you can see all the deployments that were presented basically or were done by the Azure Resource Manager. So that's usually my first point of entry or check when one of my deployments is not working, to see if that produces any problems or error messages. And then I can work on that one, because it might be that some of the references are not done correctly, or even if you deploy it for the second time, that Bicep doesn't, or the ARM doesn't fully understand that it's an existing resource already. So it might be that one of the references to the resources were not flagged as already existing or created by the template. So that might interfere and explain why it's disconnecting from the vHub.
Yeah, and also depending on the way you're deploying this, sometimes you don't get the full error message inside the console where you're deploying from, whether that's PowerShell or something else. And the portal does allow you to click through all of the error messages and get probably some more details on the exact error. But if you're not able to fix it, feel free to either send us something, and we'll happy to take a look at it in more detail to see if we can help you along. It's no problem.
While eating a burger or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for the answer. I actually got hungry like at the beginning of the session. Like I didn't have lunch or breakfast yet. And then,
okay,
my
I do
God,
apologize.
I'm going to eat something after the session. You made me hungry, Esther. Yes.
Well, I was going to apologize for that, but I'm not sorry, to be honest.
We're humans. It's good to be ourselves also. Like we're friends and everyone. We eat.
Yes,
all right. Next
So
question.
then next question is from Azar, who asks, JSON templates are used as artifact for Azure Blueprint. How can we replace all existing blueprints smoothly with artifacts based on Bicep?
Oh, I wish it was that easy, because I have to admit that currently we are, or I'm part of a DevOps initiative within a project that is looking at virtual machine image deployments, for instance, and we figured we wanted to dynamically adjust the templates. And as Azar is also mentioning, JSON is perfect because you can use PowerShell to import JSON as an object and then make the changes and then export it back to the JSON template. Unfortunately, Bicep is not an object-oriented language, so to speak. So it's just basically plain text. So I cannot import it like a convert from JSON into an object and easily manipulate it. So I am suspecting that in this particular case, you can still use Bicep in your repository as that template for your code, but you will need to do that transpile step in between and then pick up the JSON that it created, that the transpile produces, and then use that as your Azure blueprint. So that still allows you to make it easier to build those templates. But unfortunately, due to the mechanism of Azure Blueprint, I think you still need to have that JSON as input and not the Bicep natively.
Yeah, and I think that the good thing about that, although it does sound like a downside not be able to use it, but it also allows you to leverage all of the linter rules to actually get feedback on the transpilation process as well. So it does bring you some additional benefit as you are transpiling it to see what the end result in JSON is going to be. And as Esther mentioned, that does allow you to start authoring the templates in Bicep and have all of the code completion and features in there, while in the end, you'll probably be using and leveraging the decompiled JSON templates for that.
Right. Thank you. Let's take one more question. I found the next one, I think, interesting. All right. So Said, if I hope I pronounce your name correctly. If not, I apologize. But here is the question. How can I use Azure Bicep to implement a multi-environment deployment strategy for my infrastructure, and what are the best practices for doing so?
I'll let Freek answer
a lot of
that
great questions today.
Yeah, that's a great question, because we didn't really show that. But once you start, by default, if you deploy something to Azure, the target scope, so the scope of where you're deploying it, is going to be in a single resource group, right? That's the default target scope. But as soon as you start to work with modules, and we didn't really explicitly show you that, but what you do is inside the Bicep file, you specify the target scope to something else, to, for example, a subscription or even a management group on top of that. And that allows you to then, using modules and using the scope of a module, to deploy it to a specific subscription and then into a specific resource group, to have multi-environment across different Azure subscriptions or even different management groups on top of it. So the target scope property, that's the one to look for. That allows you to deploy resources into different areas across different regions or different Azure subscriptions as well.
Yeah, and it also usually means that if you are deploying it via PowerShell, that instead of the new resource group deployment commandlet, there's also a new deployment commandlet that allows you to go above that resource group scope for your deployment. So that is also a trigger for ARM to realize that it needs to look for a different scoping in the template itself.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Should we, I don't think we have time to answer all questions, Håkan, but do you want to grab one or two more, or what do you think?
Yeah, we can do that. And let's see here. Yeah, I think I would just take take the next one here. So the next one is from Ashish. Who asks, how can I use secrets in my
That's
Bicep
a good one.
code?
Yes. Please do not do as I showed in the videos and put them in clear text. First of all, the extension and the linter rules will beat you up for that. The way I do it, especially also if I'm incorporating it in my DevOps CI/CD pipelines and automated deployments, is to have either the secrets within, for instance, in Azure DevOps, you have your variable groups, or you can even reference your key vault secrets from within, I think, Bicep as well, if you are using modules. So within a module, you can reference, by using a standard function, you can reference a key vault secret. So that allows you to not explicitly have to put the secrets itself, the strings in your Bicep files, but to reference them to the key vault and the secrets that you have managed within your key vault. But the only trick to do that is to use to have that module file, that Bicep file that uses all the parameters and properties, and then reference that from another, like the main Bicep that Freek showed, reference that module file, and then you can use that key vault functionality. So it's a bit complex, but it does work to keep the secrets out of your code, so to speak. Freek is now cleaning up some secrets, I think.
No, I was quickly trying to find if I could find an example, but I don't have it in place. But you're right. So there's a dedicated function that's actually introduced a couple of months or half a year ago that allows you, like as I said, to retrieve it from the Azure Key Vault. And since Azure Key Vault is also an Azure resource itself, you can also deploy the keyword using Bicep, enter in the secrets, and then retrieve them secretly using that function as well. So I was going to see if I could find a quick example, but I failed.
Yeah, and the other trick that I did is if you deploy, for instance, your template with PowerShell, is that I used splatting for my parameters. So I built a hash table to externally, through that hash table, specify all the parameters. And in that case, I could use the secure string within PowerShell to make sure that my secret is not out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's great. Oh, there's a lot of questions, Håkan. It's like, we could take another hour answering great questions.
I think we
what we also can do is that you send me and Freek the questions, and then we will answer them, and we can post them either with the video later on, or in another way. We'd be happy to answer all the questions that there are out there.
Yes, and also we have the a short 15-minute, 20 minutes fika, and I shared the bit.ly link to the Zoom meeting. So right after the stream, we will connect to that Zoom meeting. And if you remember your question, you can definitely get that answer further from our guests today, from Esther and Freek.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, it's a great start, like powerful session, Esther and Freek. Thank you so much, and I really love the engagements of our our audience today. So thank you for the interaction and asking questions. It's great. So thank you so much. Any words, Hakan, from you?
No, I'm just very, very impressed by this session here. It was very informative. I also like that there was people were engaged, and also what I liked mostly was also that there were many people helping out each other in the comments.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
It's really great. Yes. And one of my favorite part of this session is the visualizer.
I
loved
know.
it. Yes.
That's awesome, right?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. Okay, so I think we're about to end our session. Just to finalize, Easter and Rick, do you have any aside from what the book and everything, do you have any upcoming community events that you want to share to our audience today?
Wow. So next week is a virtual Azure Community Day. So I have been, I'm not going to say tricked, but I have been asked if once again I would love to present. And in my case, it's going to be more about my journey transitioning from ops to DevOps and the mindset change that came with it that I had to go through. So if you are interested in that, that will be streamed next week, Wednesday, at 4:30 CET. And I guess the first in-person one is going to be Agile Disrupt, but that's very end-user computing focused. So hopefully I'll meet some of you there in person as well.
Yes, that's great. How about you, Freek? Do you have anything coming?
Do have a couple of things planned, but it's still very early at the beginning of the year, so I still have to structure the agenda and take a look at that. But yeah, be sure to watch social channels, LinkedIn and Twitter. I'll make sure to send any upcoming events, and hopefully we'll bring the on tour event in person again with Esther as well. That'll be fun.
Yes.
But yeah, looking forward
Okay.
to this new year.
That's great. Thank you so much, everyone. Before I actually end our stream and say goodbye and see together again in Zoom, let me just share this session we have coming, which is next session will be with another MVP, Victor Hedberg, and he will be sharing about security, implementing RBAC in Microsoft Defender. So if you're interested in this topic, feel free to join us in 2 weeks, next on the 24th of January. All right. I think I'm good. Are you ready, Håkan?
Yes. Looking
All
forward to
right.
Fika.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want to let go. Like, yes, but let's see each other again on this meeting. Thank you, everyone, and have a great weekend. Enjoy with yourselves, family, how you do it. Have a great weekend, and see you in 2 weeks again. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.